For those of you joining the call today, we're going to wait for just about a minute or so to let our other attendees join in. We've got a large group signed up. We've got a fantastic webinar for you today and want to make sure everybody has a chance to see that. So hang on tight for about a minute and we'll get rolling. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started and uh, just get our afternoon ready to move forward. My name is Kevin Mickey. My role with ERISA has gone on for a number of years. I'm a past president of the organization, now the Geospatial Professional Network, formerly ERISA. I am involved with the Community Resilience Committee within the GPN, which is responsible for the webinar that you will see today. And like many passionate ERISA members or GPN members, I'm involved with many other aspects of the organization. If you are new to the Geospatial Professional Network, I encourage you to look into it because it offers a lot to its members as well as the geospatial profession in general. One of the things that I want to do today before I introduce our guest speaker is to tell you a little bit about what's happening within the organization. In addition to this webinar, we do have other webinars coming up. Many are in the pipeline right now. So the one that's coming up most immediately is on August 11th. We have a researcher from Purdue University will be talking to us about a modular open source geospatial data science ecosystem that he has developed, and I will steal a little bit of his thunder here and tell you that he's going to talk about a free resource that's really interesting for a lot of people. So put that on your calendar. It's going to be well worth attending. We have many other webinars in the pipeline right now, so check back often so that you learn about those things through our newsletters, through our website, and any other resource where information about the GPN is made available. In addition to webinars, we offer a number of other programs, among which the most important are our Leadership Academy opportunities. We have 2 Leadership Academies coming up, one in November that will take place in New Orleans, and the second in December, which will be in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. If you've not been in those locations at those times of year, I encourage you to go. It is a great experience in both cities. And the Leadership Academy will help you grow your professional skills and, of course, help you develop your professional network. All advantages to being involved in a community like that offered by the GPN. We now have a new learning annex, which is available to you. This has a combination of things that include educational offerings, workshops, webinars, and the like, and a variety of other information that's available that wants you to take advantage of the opportunity to learn about and earn certificates of completion that you can use towards GISP points and a whole host of other opportunities that it's definitely worth your time to investigate. If you have not ever attended a GIS Pro event, you have a tremendous gap in your professional experience, and I encourage you to fill that gap this October from the 6th to the 9th in Denver, Colorado, where the GIS Pro conference will take place. It is an event loaded with information from our geospatial professional colleagues with educational opportunities, and of course, lots of opportunity for fun and networking mixed in a really lovely location of the country. So hope to see you there. Bottom line, we want you to get connected, stay connected, and think really seriously about joining the GPN. Years ago when I joined, I didn't understand what I was missing, and today I would not even think about not being part of this organization. It's made a big difference in my career, and I know it can make a big difference in yours. So what I'm going to do now, I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker today, Dr. Norm Levine. Norm is the professor of geology and environmental geosciences at the University of Charleston, South Carolina. otherwise known as the College of Charleston. He earned his PhD at Purdue University in Earth and Environmental Sciences. Norm is an applied geologist, has a specialization in GIS and remote sensing technology, in particular in the application of geologic and environmental and hazard-related issues. Norm's been recognized for his work in natural hazards ranging from climate change to earthquake and landslide mitigation and more. He is a fellow of the Geological Society of America, a NASA climate change scientist, and a NOAA climate researcher. Norm is also the longstanding director of the Low Country Hazard Center and the College of Charleston's Santee Cooper GIS and Remote Sensing Laboratory, as well in his spare time as being South Carolina's Earthquake Education and Program Preparedness contact. There is much more I could tell you about Norm's fantastic credentials. But I am not going to take a moment more of his time because I know he's got a great presentation for us today, talking about groundwater and its relevance to communities. And even if you do not live in a coastal community, I am absolutely confident that you will have considerable benefit by participating and attending today's session. So having known Norm for many years, I'm going to encourage you to post questions because he loves questions. And take full advantage of that chat. And I'll help moderate that as we go, Norm. So, Norm, thank you so much for taking your valuable time with us today, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and we should be good to go. Thank you. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about a project that we did for Beaufort County in Beaufort, South Carolina, and that this project is transferable to pretty much all of the coastal counties in the U.S. Our project team included members from the College of Charleston, the University of South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium, and the Planning and Water offices for Beaufort County. So changes in water tables across the coastal U.S. are impacting buried infrastructure in many ways. Septic systems, failures, corrosion of underground utilities, damage to buildings, foundations, basements, roadway and pavement degradation, utility vault, manhole inundation, as well as affecting both urban and agricultural lands through root zone saturation and salinization. All of this is leading to increased costs for infrastructure changes and the design of infrastructure in these changing environments. So what I'd like to do is basically look at how we go about understanding and then creating adaptation pathways across the region to these sorts of issues. And if you look at the figures that I have on the screen, what you can see is the conceptual model of what happens as sea level rises to the groundwater lens that's on the land, and how with rising sea levels or inundation due to storms or increasing frequency of inundation can actually affect buried infrastructure, bringing with it increased chances of salinization across the area. So as sea level rises over time, so does the groundwater table. It happens across the region, and it impacts that buried infrastructure. And for this talk, we'll be concentrating on septic system. The interactions and the models that we're going to be discussed can be used on any of the other types of buried infrastructure that we're looking at across the coastal systems. So I'm going to do this more as kind of a tutorial to doing or getting this sort of analysis done. And for us, the first step was to create an inventory of creating an inventory of buried structures. As I said, we're concentrating on septic systems, and I'm going to drop to the last note. For South Carolina, up until recently, septic system records and permits were not held for more than 5 years, and they were discarded. So the landscape of septic in South Carolina is fairly poorly understood. So in order to do a study like this, we have to analyze and figured out what the buried infrastructure is. And for most places, you may have this information at the municipal level. But for us, it meant we had to actually start creating an inventory of buried structures. We created this by actually looking at systems that we had records for in terms of whether or not they were connected to sewer, whether or not they had agricultural water, whether or not they had regular water, how that was. And we then were able to categorize parcels across our study region as whether or not they were considered a septic system, a probable septic area, most likely on sewer, or were definitely on sewer systems. This was done in collaboration with the Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer Authority, and we developed a protocol which is now in use in other counties for helping to determine the septic status across the region. Once the septic status was developed, we could actually then move forward and start looking at how we were going to take care of the groundwater. In order to understand the groundwater surface, we first looked at using some of the federal models that are out there. We looked at the USGS's Cosmos groundwater model, and we discovered that this model was sorry about that. This model was not suitable because the resolution of the study was too coarse and the uncertainties were too great. When looking at it with relative to the parcels in the area, what you can see in this Cosmos model is a lot of the land is already showing up as inundated that have these wonderful little black boxes on them, which are actually the buildings, which are not currently inundated at this time. Instead, we decided to go with a topographically constrained groundwater model. And what that means is we were using known groundwater heights at the surface to help constrain and create a groundwater model for the area. The groundwater table that we developed for this project was found to be within half a meter of control wells across, and it also made a realistic groundwater map where the only blue that is showing were actually known water features across the area. So how do we create this topographically constrained surface? Well, we started out with a set of well data. We also have well data that we could then use as control. We had water body elevations. We had the positions of perennial streams. We had the knowledge of where the mean high water table was in the coastal area. And then we created a model that also looked at ephemeral streams by knowing the average depth below the ephemeral streams in different elevations across the county. And this was done with some spot checking and just a simple relationship of how groundwater normally follows topography and terrain. In order to, once this was all combined, we were able to create a groundwater depth map. Now, this particular map shows on the side here that the area in blue is 0 to 1 meter. And that 1 meter is in there because that is the height of the bottom of our shallowest septic systems in the area. So this map right off the bat gives us an idea of what land, if it's considered land, would not be usable right from the start. So we had a number of wells that we put in across the area, and we compared this to some standard analytical model solutions for groundwater and our topographic solution. Our topographic solution was found to be within a ½ meter of the average groundwater depth of these wells, meaning that this model, which was computationally easy to define, was actually able to really fairly accurately project average groundwater depth across the entire county. Our next step was understanding inundation scenarios and future climate change scenarios. Last month, we were able to see through the GPN network a wonderful presentation on the sea level rise calculator. And these NOAA data products can really help create an understanding of both parcel and building level sea level rise, storm scenarios, and flooding scenarios across a region. In fact, it can be used to help understand the frequency and magnitude of the problems in the case of this region up through 2100. From these water inundation scenarios, we were able to actually look at present day inundation, 2050 inundation, and 2100. These timelines were the timelines that Beaufort County had requested as their timelines for planning. And so we presented this information in order to actually develop a better understanding of how buried infrastructure would react across the region. And as I said, we're going to be concentrating on septic systems. So our next step was to actually develop a model of vulnerability for those buried structures. In South Carolina, there are 4 types of approved septic systems that can be used within the ground. The first is a conventional system. This one is the deepest system, extending down further than either of the 2 shallow systems. And there is an ultra shallow system, which is a built up or vaulted system, partially above ground while still below ground. Better way of understanding this is to actually look at the depths that are affected as we look at this. So the ultra shallow system means that the bottom of the drain field is sitting at 19 inches, so to say, and the shallow systems go down to 24 inches, whereas a conventional system normally is down approximately 39 inches, which is a meter below the surface. Anything below that has ample space for the groundwater table to move and migrate. This means with the groundwater map that we developed previously, we could then characterize it by these separate levels of elevation, creating a map understanding of those areas where different types of septic systems could be used or would be considered inappropriate for use. In this case, this map really just focuses on the idea that those brown areas are areas where ultra shallow systems are already at groundwater levels and going down to each of those levels, showing where we have caution at using groundwater. So once we have this map, we can combine it for use in future flood scenarios in order to create days of impairment maps for the region. This allows us to estimate the groundwater table response to both storm events and tidal events for the time periods that were of interest to the municipality. By modeling daily groundwater table elevation impairment, we could define that impairment as the number of times that the groundwater was greater than the drain field height, meaning that the drain field was therefore impaired. Then we could count the number of days that that groundwater exceeded the base elevation of the septic system and generate regional maps that could be used to really understand the number of days of impairment expected in each of the time horizons. Here's an example of one of the communities that we were studying. This is the Shell Point community in Beaufort, South Carolina. And what you can see is that we were able to actually identify those parcels that were already impaired, as well as those parcels that would be impaired in different scenarios. And what you can see is that in the current day, there are currently only 15 parcels that have 20 or more days of impairment. But as we move to 2050, we see that there are 173 parcels that have more than 100 days of impairment, and that number grows to 514 parcels, or 20% of the parcels in 2100. This means that we can then figure out a way to really express this so that planners and municipal officials could actually have actionable timelines that they could work with. And these timelines for the planners will allow them to really understand and develop plans to mitigate the issues of septic system impairment. In our case, we developed 4 categories of impairment. Those that were currently impaired, those that would be impaired by 2050, and those that would be impaired by 2100, along with, of course, those unimpaired by 2100. And this means that we're really able to give the municipalities a timeline on which are the first areas they need to be working on or converting or finding alternatives for, and have actionable timelines for the other areas. So this is one of the communities, the Alljoy community, looking at its septic impairment. And the bright red are areas that are already impaired in this community. You'll notice there's a red outline surrounding part of the community with impairment in Alljoy. And as of this date, Beaufort County has already received funds to actually convert those properties to sewer and move them off of septic, reducing the water quality impairments that were due to this sort of impairment in the area. Each of the study areas, we prepared these same sorts of maps. This is an example of the St. Helena community, where you can see the already impaired, but the increase of impairment in 2050 and the increase further in 2100, and just how much of the area will actually need to be mitigated. And finally, that Shell Point community that you saw before, that Shell Point community has several areas where septic is currently impaired in the area. So there are a number of key outcomes from this study. This methodology itself can actually be implemented anywhere along the US coast by tidal and sea level rise issues. The key findings for Beaufort County was that some of the communities already faced anywhere between 10 and 20% septic impairment. By 2100, nearly 39% of the Beaufort County parcels with septic systems could face impairment. And impaired systems rise from 14% to 27% in the Shell Point community, with over 2/3 of the septic systems being impacted by 2100 in St. Helena. There are a number of policy implications this brings out. There are infrastructure and planning and zoning implications, where we have suggested the update to land use planning to discourage new septic systems in the vulnerable areas and to encourage different types of treatment, whether they're community systems or whether or not they are vaulted septic systems that remove the problems. We're looking at the municipality is looking at requiring higher elevations and alternative wastewater technologies, and they're looking at incorporating groundwater rise into the building codes and drainage requirements. In terms of permitting and septic regulations for South Carolina, this is a statewide regulatory environment. And this study suggests changes or revisions to the permitting rules that include projected groundwater levels. It mandates site-specific impairment assessments and suggests that this can be done readily prior to new permits, which would then allow for periodic reevaluation of those existing systems under different types of climate change scenarios, including increased precipitation scenarios. And then mapping and monitoring are suggestions that are being made and are already being implemented in several other counties in South Carolina now, coastal counties, where we're looking at developing county level septic and groundwater vulnerability maps. We're looking at ways to update septic system inventories, and the state has determined that they will no longer be removing septic after 5 years. So we are now starting with all new septic system permits will be on file permanently. And we are looking at the creation of dashboards to help communicate these risk timelines to property owners and for use in for the policymakers. Now, I know I went very quickly through this, and There's more information. There is a master's thesis that was written on groundwater vulnerability using this modeling approach, as well as there is additional information on the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium site. And with that, I'm going to open this up for a discussion of techniques and issues that we might have in our communities. So I'd like to echo what Kevin, is anyone doing work in their communities that's similar to what we are doing? And if so, what is your experience so far? Thank you.
Norm, I'll follow that on. I know you have extensive knowledge because we worked a bit together through the Community Resilience Committee, not only of South Carolina, but other states as well. I'm also confident we have a number of individuals on this call that are in coastal communities and certainly elsewhere. I'd love to hear what your thoughts might be on the challenges or opportunities for other coastal communities and potentially for non-coastal communities in applying all or some of your methodology.
I think there is a great deal of opportunity for this methodology. We have been working on this methodology. We've done part of coastal Delaware now using this methodology as part of a larger NSF project that adopted this methodology for part of the project. We are also looking at it in Rhode Island. We have applied it in other areas of South Carolina, and we have looked at applying part of this in Georgia. So we know that it's readily adaptable in these coastal areas. And I also am confident in saying with the newer LIDAR data that's out there, developing these groundwater models along with the newest products from NOAA CCAP in terms of their 1 meter resolution water mapping that's out there is a wonderful tool. The new 3D hydrologic line data set that's been developed by the USGS actually will have, in addition to perennial streams, ephemeral stream information in it as well, which also helps in generating these maps. And these generalized understanding of the groundwater table in an area that's really just a textbook analysis of how groundwater varies with elevation from a known water level height can be used anywhere in the country to create these topographic systems with a knowledge of those materials. In the away from the coastal zone, you may see a more sharpening change in the groundwater level of the meteoric system, but it can be done outside of this zone. So this is really applicable to anywhere where you're looking at major water change through flooding, whether it's riverine flooding or rainfall event flooding. If you have an idea of the frequency and changes in that flooding, you can actually create this understanding in any of those areas.
Thank you, much appreciated. We have 38 people on this call that I'm sure have at least some questions. So Norm and I can always enjoy having conversations. We'll continue to do so, but I want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to ask your own questions, especially given what Norm just said and the potential relevance of this to your committee, our community. One thing I really love about this work, Norm, is you kept using the word actionable. A lot of studies tend to say this is what could happen, but they don't offer necessarily a lot of actionable steps that could be taken to mitigate the problems, and this does. This is something that could be implemented and certainly should be of interest, I think, to individuals or communities that face these kinds of challenges. And Most definitely, that's not unique to the city of or county of Charleston at all. Um, Norm, I am curious, in terms of data, did you find any particular challenges in acquiring the data sets? I know you did in some cases, so love to hear you comment on that. And for the most part, how much of it was public domain kind of information versus stuff that you had to develop for the project? Because I know that could be a decision point for communities that might be interested in implementing this.
So what I'd what I'd like to say is the majority of data is publicly accessible. Uh, but does that mean it still needs to be massaged and developed into a product that's usable? That will always go on. The 1 meter resolution across our area, we have between basically a 2 foot to a 1 meter resolution digital elevation model that we used as the basis for our topographically constrained groundwater surface. We also had to develop a methodology to understand from the local water authorities who they were serving and who they weren't serving. And that meant a number of agreements in terms of, making sure that the municipality was the one requesting that the water service people, we had data that sometimes had to be removed due to privacy concerns. We had other data that had to be anonymized, but it was really uh, what we needed to do was create a model that could then be used with water company data. And that's what we did for our septic system understanding of the area. And really, that became key to understanding it and validating the maps as we went out and then validated septic, and we had surveys developed using Survey 123 that went out to the community asking whether or not they knew if they were on septic. And believe it or not, some people didn't even know they were on septic systems. They had bought property, and although it was probably disclosed during their purchase, it was not something they focused on. They weren't really worried about what septic actually meant when they were having it. And so that was the hardest of the data sets to bring in. Another hard data set that we dealt with was actually buried pipelines, as well as buried utilities, because there's a sensitivity over that. And again, this study shows the septic systems, but the same can be said for buildings, especially where many of our buildings are built with crawl spaces that go below the surface a certain amount, and those buildings built on slab, and whether or not that's going to be affected. I noticed in the chat there was a question on the topographically constrained groundwater surface. I'm going to go back to that picture for a minute and explain part of what we did. So we had as our, in modeling terms, our boundary condition, we knew where mean high water, or where we were at, where water was at the surface on kind of a monthly high water level. And so we use that as the first constraint on our model. The second constraint we used was the perennial stream data set that came from NOAA's CCAP program. Their 1 meter perennial stream data information. We then converted that all to points, as well as taking in ephemeral stream and lake information across the area. Most of our ponds across Beaufort County are unlined ponds, so they are direct connections to the groundwater. And so we use those ponds as well. And we created a fairly dense point data set of groundwater expected water elevations across the region. Once we had that water surface map created, an interpolation, we were then able to subtract that from the topographic map, looking at where water was above the surface and below the surface, creating a depth to groundwater surface map. I hope that answers the question a little bit better.
Casey, do you have any additional questions? Or for that matter, does anyone have any questions for Norm?
I know
Norm,
I'm a little fast.
I'll throw another question at you, Norm. I know that you have a lot of students that are involved in projects. Was this one where they were able to help learn from the experience?
Yes, actually, Duncan, whose thesis, this was the outgrowth of work that was done not only here in Beaufort County, but work done with one of my graduate students on Kiowa Island, one of our barrier island communities, where we first prototyped the topographically constrained groundwater system and tied it directly to lake levels that were being measured, as well as groundwater wells across the island. Then we moved this out into Beaufort County, where Duncan worked on it in his thesis. Right now, there are 4 other counties basically being looked at right now, all of which have students working on this same sort of thing. And I can say that all of the students who have worked on these projects have been able to actually get positions in the field doing this sort of work for a lot of consulting. I know, in fact, Lee Bundrick, who just commented, he's part of the Seabrook region. And the actual, what Lee is asking is what contributes to, in his case, the RSME of the groundwater elevation being, in his case, between 1 and 1.5 meters. And that actually has to do with whether or not you included the ephemeral streams in, and whether or not you had a relationship to begin with of height to ephemeral, groundwater depth to ephemeral stream that you could count into your study. We actually had information in Beaufort County that showed that it started at a ½ meter below our ephemeral streams, and then went to, as it got elevation was higher in certain areas, that that elevation or that depth to groundwater increased. And so we were able to include that into our mapping, which is why ours was within a ½ meter of the elevation that we're looking at. We also know that in the coastal zone, what we found was within the first 100 meters of shore, some of Dammy's work from USC on the groundwater table actually showed within that first 100 meters, we were really always within 1 meter of elevation, that groundwater table never went below that meter mark within that first 100 meters of coast, actually saying that for coastal parcels that you really could not be looking at, or there was greatly limited area for septic systems in that area. I don't know, Lee, is that answering a little bit of your question? And again, some of this work was an outgrowth of the work that was done originally on Kiowa Island with Diedrich Moulton, who actually did that study with Lee Bundrick. And then we then scaled it up from just a single barrier island to an entire county. And now I've moved it into several additional counties.
Thanks for speaking to those questions, Norm. And I really appreciate the reference to the student role as well. I know many schools, yours, mine, and many others probably represented in this call are really emphasizing experiential learning these days and connecting students to very real, supervised, of course, project experiences. This is what can happen. So for communities that are looking for partners, this is a good example. I see you have another question from Lee as well.
Yeah, it's a great example. And that's exactly what I was saying. It's that he had the perennial streams in his model, but not the ephemeral streams, which is why he had a deeper or a greater change in his groundwater information than we did. The incorporation of ephemeral streams is kind of important. And I will tell you that this has been a great project for students to use. It's led to a lot of additional work that students, and we've currently had probably a good 8 to 10 students who have been working with these sorts of models and looking at these issues all the way across what's known as the South Carolina Low Country now.
Yep. These students are familiar with the latest and greatest in technology and methodology, so it's great to have them involved. Are there other questions for Norm? We don't have to push this all the way to the top of the hour. Oh, there you go. There's a good question from Casey.
All right. So in the communities that are already at risk, I'm going to jump back to that picture of Alljoy community. There we go. And on the Alljoy community in the centered red area, what you can see is in a community that's already at risk, there are a number of available, what's the best way of phrasing this? Alternatives, as well as until somewhat recently, a lot of multiple funding avenues for municipalities to work with their water groups to actually enhance and convert people over. So in the case of the Alljoy community here, they were able actually to secure an infrastructure grant that allowed them to connect people to the municipal water, thus alleviating both the risk of many of these properties were actually using groundwater for their home water, as well as using as well as having septic systems. So if they were already compromised, they could be affecting properties downstream or downflow from that groundwater risk. So in those communities that are already at risk, the municipalities have been working on securing funding and plans to actually move those in first. So by identifying the risk and working with the municipalities directly, when I was saying we were creating actionable information, this allowed them to actually get a really good jump on what was going on. I also noticed there's a really good question about the Cosmos data. So I will tell you what we found with the Cosmos data is part of it was the resolution of the data set itself, which the version that I was showing, or the comparison, the Cosmos data set was developed in our area at a 10-meter resolution. At the parcel scale, that sounds like it might be good enough, but it also was developed with kind of an average, what's known as saturated conductivity for the mod flow models that were used in developing it. And what that meant was, in many areas, the soil conductivity varies more than the model allowed for. Whereas the topographically constrained groundwater model does not actually have the saturated conductivity. That's actually kind of built into the placement of the water bodies and what's going on. And knowledge of your soils and that can also help you modify that ephemeral stream depth curve. So if you do have that soils, you can do that in your model as well. So the ephemeral stream data is becoming more and more readily available. It is being developed as part of the 3-depth solution, but it can be the NHD 4 data set can be used in conjunction to access some of that, or just using your high resolution digital elevation models, you can actually create the ephemeral streams within the data set yourself if it doesn't exist already. So for coastal California, you actually have a lot more data available in general than we have. And I would actually think that this that the topographically constrained model would work well, although with elevation changes and rock type changes, there would have to be a better understanding of depth within ephemeral streams in a particular area. And that can often be done just by using probes to develop where how deep it is to the actual groundwater interface in a sampling of the ephemeral streams across the area. The Cosmos data may be good enough, but our experience was it over estimated groundwater height in general.
All right, I
The question.
think we may have covered all the questions in the chat. I'll give it one more try here. If anybody has any questions, drop them in now. Otherwise, Norm, I'm going to go ahead and thank you. In lieu of, if any questions do come up, we'll still get them in. But thank you for presenting this information. I know I'm always enjoy hearing what you have to share. Your research is always interesting, and this is no exception. Norm will be doing yet another presentation webinar for us here in the next few months. And if you find what he did interesting, you can hear Norm all the time just simply by attending the monthly Community Resilience Committee meetings, because Norm is a very active member, along with a number of other talented, interested, and always collaborative individuals. So we welcome your participation in that role. So thank you for everyone again for taking the time to attend today's presentation. This will be posted on the organization's YouTube site soon. So if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about this information, then point them in that direction. And we certainly would encourage you to share information about other upcoming events as well. So thanks a lot. And Norm, we'll see you again soon in the future. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you all.